Hello everybody, welcome back to Certified Collectibles. This is session 2 in our new Q&A video series. Today we're going to be answering and addressing all the questions and comments you guys left on session 1. Now if you want to ask us any questions or have any comments for session 3, make sure you attach them to this video. Session 2, we're only going to be able to go back to our most recent Q&A segment to pull questions and comments for our next video. So if you have any new questions or new comments, make sure you post them on this video, session 2 of the Q&A video series. Now, first off, I'd like to thank everyone who sent us questions and comments. We have about 10 or 12 comments and questions here that we're going to address today. So let's go ahead and get started with our first question. Now, this is actually a comment someone made about a statement that I made in the last video. I said, it seems like any PC game you want to find sealed, you can find sealed relatively cheaply on the market. The viewer said that they didn't think I was watching or following the market that closely. This, what I meant by relatively cheaply, was relative to the console game market. A lot of these PC games that you see on the market, the sealed PC games, they trade at a discount in premium, let's say, to the console or the equivalent console game. So a lot of those titles that you see, let's say Medal of Honor or Call of Duty, a lot of those early PC games, they do trade at a nice premium. I mean, you might be paying thousands of dollars for a nice mint condition sealed quality PC version of that game. But now if it's a console version, one of the early console versions of that game, you're going to be paying typically 2 or 3 times as much. The console market right now is the one that is blowing up because WATA is grading the console games. Now, once WATA starts grading the PC games, you know, there are some titles that are going to have a bump. Some of these early series or the early franchises that started on PC, you could probably expect to see those bump once WATA actually starts grading the PC games and they start hitting the auction market. But right now, everybody's focused on the console games, so PC games are trading relatively cheaply compared to the console market. You know, like I said, you're still going to be paying hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for nice mint condition versions of some of these games, but that is still relatively cheap compared to the console games. That's what I meant by that statement. I didn't mean they're super cheap in general on the market. You're still going to be paying good money for some of those titles. There are some premium titles out there for PC, and once the grading companies start grading those and they start hitting the auction block, you are going to see a bump in some of those. So keep that in mind. That's what I meant by relatively cheaply, not cheaply overall. Now, the next question we have here, this is one actually a few of you guys asked, and this is one we've been asked recently. A lot of our clients have been calling in asking this as well. What are our thoughts on the graded VHS market? Is this to be taken seriously or not? Now, the graded VHS market, the VHS tapes are going to be graded by VGA. You know, if you guys are familiar with that particular company, CGA, they grade the video games. Oh, yeah, they grade, video games. They also grade action figures. They also grade die-cast, and they also grade dolls. Now, they've been grading die-cast and dolls for many years. A lot of people aren't really participating in that market. A lot of you guys might not even know they grade those particular items. I think the VHS tapes are going to fall into a very niche market, just like die-cast and dolls. They're not going to be like video games. You know, video games are items that a lot of you guys have really nostalgic, fond memories of playing when you were kids, and they're really pushing that market to be very similar to the comic book market. VHS tapes, you know, how important is it for you to have a sealed copy of the original Die Hard or original Ghostbusters? It might not be as important to have a sealed VHS tape of that, especially with all the streaming series and DVD, you know, all the streaming series and DVDs and digital media now. You could say the same thing about video games, but like I said, with video games, people actually have a nostalgia attached to those, fond memories attached to the actual tangible item that they used to play. That's more of an interactive media. A VHS tape, we just don't really see this market as being that big. You know, the VHS collecting market has always been around, you know, and some of those VHS tapes do trade at great premiums, especially a lot of the early Disney Black Diamond material. Those early Black Diamond cartoons on VHS do trade at a substantial premium. So if you are in the VHS collecting market already, you already know this. And there are some tapes that actually trade at a pretty good premium. We're not saying that they're worthless, you know, all VHS is worthless. We're just saying that this market, is it going to be as big as comic books or video games? Probably not. You're talking about a very small niche market and a very thin market. So if there's 10 copies of some of these Black Diamond Disney cartoons out there in high grade, that might be all that the collecting community needs. We really don't think there's a lot of people going to rush into this VHS market, especially with the run up in action figures, or a lot of the graded toys in it now, the CGC graded comic books, all the water graded video games. Is there enough room in the market to push a whole new segment of this industry in VHS tapes? We don't really think so. So VHS tapes we don't think are necessarily going to be huge. If you're already collecting VHS tapes, then you already know the ones that are important in this particular market or segment of the market. To grade them, I don't know if that's going to add a whole lot of value. So that's our opinion on the VHS graded market. Oh, here's another one here on our thoughts on the graded gaming and player guides. Now, this is something that CGC is going to grade. These are gaming and player guides that actually come with video games. I'm assuming this is what you're talking about, or some of the ones you actually buy off the shelf. These are going to be considered magazines if you send them into CGC for grading. Now, some of those actually may have some value. If some of these gaming or player guides actually contain material that's not in the games, or like, maybe the first appearance of maybe cheat codes. These are examples. I'm not saying these actually add value to these books. Maybe if there's characters that they have an appearance in the gaming or playing guides that don't actually appear in the games, they were left out of the final game, and the player guide came out prior to that, they might have some significance. What you're going to be looking for in the game guides and player guides here, especially the graded versions, are content that add value to that particular issue. If you just have some random game or player guide in a CGC 10, nobody's really going to care. It might be worth $50-$60. If there's no material inside that book that is of great value in the collecting community. And that is something that the collecting community itself will determine. You'll see prices on certain game and player guides already high in the market, and those are books that actually have some content inside that's valuable to the collecting community. And that's what you're going to be looking for. Not all of them are going to have value, but definitely CGC is going to grade some of these. Like I said, they're going to be graded as magazines. Some of these game and player guides have already been graded. And you already see some of the early Nintendo player guides and some of the early Nintendo magazines graded, and they do trade for a pretty good premium. So there is value in that market. Not every single thing is going to have value. So you're definitely going to want to do research on that. Find out which guides are actually valued and prized by the collecting community before you start investing in that, because not everything is going to have value. We suspect very few of those guides are going to have a lot of value. So definitely do your research before you get into that, but that is a good question. Another viewer asked us about videos on Morgan dollars and peace dollars, or Liberty dollars. Now, we're going to try to answer this as succinct as we can. This is a very long answer, so we're going to try to cut this short. The reason we don't do videos on Morgan dollars and peace dollars is because there's just so much of them. There's so many of these coins out on the market, and this is a very sophisticated market. People have been collecting Morgan and peace dollars for 100 years, close to it now. Especially with the Morgan dollars, these came out in the 1800s. Peace dollars, of course, much later. But people have been collecting Morgan dollars for many, many years. This is a very sophisticated market. Not all these coins have value. To get into an investment-grade Morgan dollar, you're talking about MS67 or 68, 69 graded coin. If you're talking about just a common date. Now, if you have a scarce date or a scarce mint mark, now you're talking, you're in a different field. These are very specific numismatic coins. To actually glean enough information from a YouTube video to actually go out and start buying these coins confidently, we just don't think it serves you guys best interest for us to do videos on Morgan and peace dollars. There's a lot to learn, very sophisticated market, a whole lot of information out there, and unless you're in the top 1% of this market, you're really not going to see much return on these. There's a reason for this. It's because over the past 10 years, like I said, we're going to try to make this a short answer. Over the past 10 years, a lot of bullion houses have been pulling back a lot of these coins from Europe. The U.S., if you're not familiar with this, the U.S. paid off their war debt with bags of Morgan dollars and bags of $20 gold pieces, $10 gold pieces, back when we were paying off our war debt to Europe. So over in Europe, there's thousands of bags of Morgan dollars and $20 gold pieces, $10 gold pieces, even $5 gold pieces. If you want to get into the smaller US gold, like the $1 and $3 gold pieces. A lot of those didn't go to Europe, so what you have on the market is pretty much what you have. But over the past 10 years, a lot of these big bullion houses, there's five big bullion houses that have been bringing over hundreds of these bags. And Morgan dollars, they come in bags of 1,000 coins, $1,000 face value bag. So if you're bringing over 20 bags, you're bringing over 20,000 coins. That is a substantial impact on the market. And that's why you saw all these prices for silver dollars, $20 gold pieces, $20 St. Gallen's, $20 Liberties. That's why you saw the prices on all these collapse a few years ago. It's because there's so much on the market, and a lot of this stuff came back in mint condition, and very high grade, like MS67s, MS66s. And a lot of this material, when it first came out, people were snatching it up, and then they realized that these bags were coming over from Europe. A lot of these were minted to pay off our war debt. So they were minted fresh, sent straight to Europe. They sat there in the vaults for many, many years. A lot of these bullion houses in the US have been paying a premium to bring them back because the graded coins sell at a much higher premium. So they were paying those banks substantially over the spot price for those items to get them back and grade them, sell them back into the collecting community. Like I said, Morgan dollars and peace dollars, very sophisticated market. It requires a lot of research, a lot of experience in those markets to actually make money in the long term. This may be something we do a video series on in the future, but this is going to require a lot of research and work to actually make money in this particular market. Very sophisticated market. So that's the reason we don't do a lot of videos on Morgan and peace dollars. Another viewer asked us or they made a comment that we concentrate more on Marvel than on DC Comics when it comes to investing in silver, bronze, and copper age. That is really just a condition of the time right now. A lot of the Marvel books are trading at a much more substantial premium than DC titles. We actually went back to a lot of our DC holdings, the comic books that we bought over the past 10, 20 years, and a lot of those DC books really haven't appreciated that much. There's only been a few that have really jumped in value, so that's why we haven't really done a video on that. Once we can get together a group of the DC comics that have had a substantial gain, we will highlight those for you guys. But the DC books, a lot of those just haven't had the run-up that Marvel books have, just because, the Marvel DC powerhouse is still churning out all those feature films and streaming series and small screen projects. So it's really pushing that market and those characters and those books. That's why we haven't really focused too much on DC. There are a lot of DC titles that have value. They haven't really had the run-up Marvel has. That's why we haven't focused on them for investment purposes. But there are some out there, so we will add that to our list of videos to do in the future. Like I said, there's great DC titles that are worth investing in, so we will put that on our roster. Now, another viewer asked us that they would like to see more best investments for main Marvel and DC comics, like the ones we did for Silver Surfer and Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man. Now, if you're not familiar with those particular videos, we actually went through a complete run of those particular titles, Silver Surfer and Spectacular Spider-Man. Let's see if I can say that correctly. We actually went through the whole run of those and pulled out all the keys, gave our opinions on which of the keys we thought were worth investing in and which ones we thought you could probably skip over. Now, the reason we haven't done more of those videos, we do have more complete runs of comics. We have a few warehouses where we store our comics, and a lot of times those complete runs get pushed to the back. So as we find those runs or as we pull them out, we will do more videos on that. So more videos for Marvel and DC are forthcoming. But, we like to actually own the items that we show you guys, items that we're highlighting for you to invest in and for you to purchase. We like to own them ourselves. A lot of YouTube guys, and this is not a slam on anybody, but a lot of guys on YouTube will give advice on images that they pull offline. They don't actually have any skin in the game. They don't actually own the items. You typically, when you're actually going out to buy and trade and actively engage in the market to purchase these items, you really have a little bit more insight on pricing, which ones are important, which ones people are willing to pay a premium for, which ones are discounted. So if you have a little skin in the game, you typically have a little bit more insight on those particular items. We're not saying anybody's doing a bad job. We're not slamming anybody for this. To warehouse and to purchase all this material and warehouse it is costly and time consuming and space consuming. So we understand why a lot of guys give advice on just images they pull offline. But like I said, for our particular channel, we like to own all the items that we show you guys we like to have skin in the game. If we're going to give you our advice, we like to actually own the item. But there are going to be more of those videos forthcoming. Now, our next question here is, looking to 2022, what video games and comics do you think that are being converted into TV shows and movies do we believe will be the most sought after, such as Something Is Killing the Children and The Last of Us? Now, we actually do comment on this a lot in our must-haves video series. If you watch any of our must-haves video series on video games and comic books, we go into which ones have been optioned for TV and film quite often, especially with our first appearances of the week for comic books. If you watch those, it's going to give you an idea of a lot of the new material that's coming out that is being optioned, that you could pick up at face value, or that's just brand new on the market, that is being optioned for TV and film next year. And so we do get into a lot of this through our other video series, especially the modern. If you look into the must-haves for the modern comic books, we go into this a lot. We discuss this. This is one of the big drivers for value in our must-haves video series, is the items that have been optioned for TV shows or feature films or streaming series. This is one of the big drivers. So if you go back and look at some of those videos, you will get a lot of that information. Something Is Killing the Children is one. The Last of Us, Bitter Root was actually optioned as well. There's been quite a lot of modern books that have been optioned for TV and film that have jumped up in price that you could still probably pick up relatively affordably on the market. So our advice would be to go back and check out our must-haves video series, both for the video games and for the modern comic books, and you will find a lot in there that have been optioned. Our next question here is actually a comment and a question. Thank you for the historical background, comps and coins and comics. Taking comics as a baseline, what titles and pieces bounce back first during that first major correction? In other words, what are the best defensive positions in games outside of just going for low pops? Give examples such as earlier lower grades versus higher later prints. This is going to be a tough question to answer broadly, because in every collecting segment of the market, some of the items that bounce back, or some of the items that bounce back quickly, were not the items necessarily that had that were part of that big boom cycle to begin with. There's a boom and bust cycle for all these collecting categories, and sometimes some of the big booming items never come back. Sometimes they come back much later. So it really depends on your investment horizon. If you're looking for a 2 or 3 year horizon, the titles are going to be much different than if you're looking for a 10 or 20 year horizon. A lot of these games and comics that are selling at substantial premiums, if they pull back, let's say they pull back 20, 30%, will they recover that over the next 2 or 3 years? It all really depends on the title. Will they recover that over the next 10 years? Very likely. But there are also items, like I mentioned before, that never recover. Take the coins, for example. Back in the coin bust, the most recent coin bust, let's just look at that one. Back in 2009, 2010, there's a big boom cycle for coins. Everything sold at a humongous premium. That coin market collapsed. It took years for that material to come back. And if you're looking into $20 gold pieces, $10 gold pieces, U.S. coins. If you're looking at the $20 U.S. gold coins, $10 U.S. gold coins, $5 U.S. gold coins, Morgan dollars, peace dollars, like we just mentioned a moment ago, that stuff fell. A lot of it had to do with a lot of the material coming out of Europe, like we just discussed. It collapsed that market. A lot of those prices have never come back to where they were selling in 2010, even though gold is about $2,000 now, and back then gold was about $1,000. The coins were still selling for more back then than they are now. So some of the items never come back, and some items do. Also with the coin market, during that same collapse, a lot of the circulating coinage, like Buffalo nickels, Indian head cents, that material never came back. Walking liberties, half dollars, that material just never came back to any great degree. So if you had that material from the year 2000, and you want to sell it now, you're probably going to take a loss. So some material never comes back. Some of it comes back more quickly than others. And so it's really hard to say without having an investment horizon, where you actually are looking to cash out, which items would be worth buying as defensive positions. Typically, as a broad statement, you want to buy the most sought after, marquee items. It's with comic books, go after, if you have the pricing guide for comic book pricing guide, go after some of their books in their top 100 list or top 50 comic book list. Those typically bounce back quickly or more quickly, and they typically hold their value during correction cycles. Same thing with video games. If you want to get into video games, get into the marquee titles, some of the Mario titles, the Zelda titles, some of the Atari titles like Pac-Man, Kaboom. Some of the games that are just marquee titles for those consoles. Those are probably going to come back the quickest because those are going to be the games that everybody wants to own. Everybody wants to have those in the collection. So if there's a pullback and a correction, a lot of guys that have been sitting on the sidelines are going to race in and pick up some of those items that's settling at a discount, hold them for, back off the market. So the prices of those will rise more quickly. So go after the more marquee, the more highly sought after titles to begin with. And those, like I said, are going to hold their value during corrections and typically are going to be the ones that bounce back after the correction the fastest. Okay, the next question here. Question number 9. We only have one more question after this. A viewer asked us to make this channel a little bit more personal. Like how many people are involved in making videos? What does the typical day look like at work? There's a team of us here. There's a group of us here that actually are in the acquisition portion of the company, but this company is actually an umbrella for a lot of different collecting segments that we actually participate in. So we have one part of our company focused on comic books, video games, trading cards, action figures, sports cards. So we have a lot of different segments of this company, and individuals work in each of those particular segments. We also do hire a lot of help for specific events. We do a lot of the cons. We did D23 one year. So we do bring a lot of people on for those events as well. So a typical day for me personally, I'm in acquisition. So I spend most of my day hunting around the world for items to bring in. Typically, that's where I spend, I'd say 90% of my time doing research on some items that are offered to us, looking at deals, pricing out deals, and that does take a lot of time because there's a lot of material out there, especially now since the prices have run up so greatly for video games and comic books. A lot of counterfeit material out there, a lot of pressed comics, a lot of altered comics, a lot of resealed video games. There's a lot of counterfeiting out there. So a typical day for me is mostly sorting through a lot of counterfeits and a lot of trash, let's say, to actually find some really good stuff and bring it in, to offer to you guys or to offer to our client base. We'll try to add a little bit more personal anecdotes and videos in the future, because there are some interesting stories that go along with a lot of these items we bring in. So we will try to be a little bit more personal with those going forward. And our final question here for this segment of our Q&A video series. Do you think the comic book market will continue to drop? Since things are opening, I'm seeing less and less Instagram sales, meaning a lot of businesses are reopening after pandemic, and prices are dropping. Do you think we've seen the bottom yet? Now, this was what was anticipated by everyone in the industry. Once businesses started to reopen after pandemic, a lot of people that has been spending all their discretionary income purchasing collectible items, now they want to go out back to the movies and baseball games and football games and parties and bars. So there's going to be a lot of guys that are a lot of collectors that are going to start looking at some of the more, let's say, B-tier collectibles that they bought and want to sell that stuff off so they can have some money to go out and play, because everybody's been cooped up for a couple years with this pandemic. So this was always anticipated, this kind of pullback, but this is not all that big a deal. If you've been actually buying high quality collectibles to begin with, you're fine in this. There's going to be a correction. Stuff's going to bounce back. Once everybody kind of finds their equilibrium with how much money they want to spend out goofing off and how much money they want to actually invest in collectibles, there's going to be an equilibrium found there. And so prices will stabilize and start moving back up. But like I mentioned, it has to be high quality collectibles to begin with. If you were snagging some of these B material or some of this more speculative material, over the past year or two, but just because everything was running up, if you were just picking out some of the less desirable material that nobody else wanted, chances are they're still not going to want it. And chances are a lot of these guys are going to be selling some of this B material into the market at low prices, because the fastest way to sell an item you have is undercut your competition, sell it quickly at a low price, get that money in, like I said, and go out to the baseball game, go out drinking, hanging out with your friends, whatever you choose to do. But a lot of the B material probably will not come back. All the high quality material, all the more marquee stuff, you have nothing to worry about if you've been buying high quality items to begin with. There will be a pullback, but our advice typically is always to buy during those pullbacks. You can get a lot of really great stuff for your collection. We purchased a ton of comics during that 2009, 2010 stock market collapse when everybody was selling their comic books because they thought the stock market was going to go to zero and the world was going to collapse. We bought a ton of AF-15s, in 3, 4, 5 grades for under $7,000, and look where those things are today. Same thing with a lot of those Silver Age comics. During that crash, we picked up as much as we possibly could because the world's not going to end, no matter how many people predicted. It's going to keep chugging along. And so you typically buy when there's, like Warren Buffett said, you buy when there's blood in the streets. So when you see prices pulling back and it's a high quality and sought after and highly desired collectible, those are the items you want to buy. If it's a B material, speculative item, you might want to pass on those because the prices are going to keep falling on those, and they might not recover, like we mentioned with a few other items in one of the previous questions. So I hope those answers were helpful to these questions and comments you guys posted on session 1. Like I mentioned before, if you guys have any questions for session 3, please make sure to attach them to the comment section of this particular video. Once again, thank you for everybody who asked us questions, posted comments here. We really do appreciate it. Hopefully, these answers will help you guys in your collecting and investing strategies. Please feel free to drop some more comments in the comment section below. Give us a thumbs up if you like this video. And as always, please remember to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Thank you for joining us here at Certified Collectibles, and we'll see you again next time.